Hey, IT friends, how's it going? Happy Tuesday. I don't know about you, but since I was a little kid, I was always told, do what you love, and the money will follow. And we see this mantra in a lot of stuff. There was Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. I watch a lot of YouTube creators, and a lot of them have said just start filming what you like to see, like what you want to film, and people eventually will build an audience. You see this advice everywhere. And I think we can all agree it's pretty wholesome advice, pretty inspiring, get you to get out there and start doing something. But how come that doesn't really seem to work that well in the SMB space? Once you move out of trying to run a hobby business and are trying to run a real business, you built it. Where are they? Why aren't they coming? Let's talk about that entrepreneurial trap a little bit. So I was on Reddit the other day and I saw this interesting post where this person, I think it was in the UK, said that MSP vendor event sales guys suck at selling their product and platform. And basically, they're at some sort of live event. It sounded like one of the smaller, peer group style events where they were being pitched to on a stage, and basically said that all of the points suck. They're weak points. The vendors are all saying why their product is best, yada, yada, yada. And obviously, we weren't there. We don't know what happened. But just kind of taking the vibe of the post, I've experienced this as well as an MSP. I continue to experience it when I go to trade shows, and I experience this now as a vendor. And why does this happen? And why is this so prevalent in this space? But if we go look at other, if we look at other industries esoterically, we don't see that happening. Why is that? Obviously, there's a variety of reasons this happens, and I'm not qualified, nor do I have enough time to cover them in the scope of this video. But I did want to hammer in on what I think part of the problem is. So, if we accept for a minute just the statement that selling is difficult and most people aren't naturally good at selling, I just accept that statement, then that means that most of us in the MSP space who are selling probably aren't naturally gifted, amazing salespeople. We're just doing the best we can. And so that kind of means that we need the deck stacked in our favor a little bit. And what I often find, especially with vendors, is there's not really a lot of deck stacking that's happening at all, but not for any sort of ignorance or malice or neglect, really for honestly rather wholesome reasons. So, as I alluded to at the beginning of my business, we were all programmed as youngsters that if you do something you love, you will naturally be able to build a success at it. And I could interpret that to say that if you do something you love, you will build a following. And I do think that is true. I think the part that was left out is the scale of time that methodology takes. And what I think a lot of vendors end up doing, we were just talking about this unironically at Help the other day, and I think is what this poster we're seeing on Reddit is a lot of entrepreneurs go out and they think they discover a problem that needs a solution. And I can make a video just on that topic because a lot of you are not actually discovering a problem. You're discovering a problem that you had, not a problem that I have, but whatever. Just put that to the side. So a lot of entrepreneurs discover a problem and they want to come up with a solution for that problem. And that's typically where I see a lot of people stop. They build the storefront, maybe not literally, but let's pretend. They build a storefront, they stock it with the inventory that solves the problem. They put the wacky waving inflatable arm filling tube man out front that says now open. They unlock the door and they stand there and nobody shows up. And they're standing in the front door with that meme like, where is everybody? Well, the thing is, you didn't tell anybody what what problem you solve. You just assumed they'd understand. And I typically see this as being probably the single biggest reason why this happens so much with vendors in our space. So specifically what I mean by that, I love going to trade shows and I will still love to wander them as an attendee. And I think it's hilarious as I walk around some of these trade shows that like I've been in this space for a really long time. I do MSP operations coaching and I'm not the smartest guy, but I'm pretty smart. And I'll still walk around these shows. I'm like, I have no idea what they do. I have no idea what they do. I have no idea what they do. And I don't mean that I don't understand the general product category they're in. Sure. Like that's easy enough to tell from the signage that that must be a company dealing with security or a company dealing with finance or a company dealing with HR or a company that does something around this operations component or ticketing, whatever. But like what they actually do, what pain they're solving for, a lot of times I have no idea. And I will go up to these booths sometimes and ask vendors and just be like, hey, so what do you do? And they'll give me their little pitch and I'll interrupt, be like, no, 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 no. I don't mean how does the product work? What pain point do you solve at my MSP? Where do I plug you in? And it's amazing to me, probably 50% of the people I talk to can't answer that question. And I think that's why. I think that's why the poster made this post. And I think that's why if you build it, they will come doesn't work, because that causes us to stop short of actually identifying the pain point in our clients, teaching them how to feel that pain and teaching them why you solve that pain. And we see the same problem with MSPs selling to their clients. So don't worry, vendors. It's not just a vendor thing. It's a small business thing. So I brought this up in a previous video. There's this dog on the nail story. And basically, there's an old country store, and this guy starts going to it, and he sees sitting out front an old hound dog sitting next to a guy in a rocking chair. And the hound dog is laying, his paws visibly laying on top of a nail sticking out of the old floorboards. And this guy goes back and forth weekly, always the same dog, same spot, sitting on the nail. And finally, he just can't help himself. He says to the old man, he's like, your dog, do you know he's sitting on a nail? And the old man's like, yep. And he's like, well, he, why doesn't he move? And the old man basically says, doesn't hurt enough. Once it hurts enough, he'll move. And I'm super simplifying that story, but the point is that we all have an innate amount of pain tolerance. And the pain has to be great enough for us to want to be involved in taking action to solve it. And if you simply stop at nails are sharp and you're sitting on one, so obviously you'd want to not sit on one, and I offer the nail hammer 3000, why aren't you buying it? That's not how it works. And that's what a lot of vendors end up doing. They only get to the point where they're like, nails are sharp. Eh? Oh, okay. Well, fine, but not enough where I feel like spending money to fix it. So you got to take it that extra step. And we see some vendors trying to do this with fear, and I think generally as an industry we don't love this, because most of us will buy on fear, but if you're smart, once you understand a situation, that fear just turns into pain. And that's where a lot of us become less motivated to continue spending. So I think that's why a lot of us don't really love only fear-based selling and find it kind of gross and feel like it's kind of like FUD, because we all kind of know that, like, yeah, the fear is valid, but as soon as the client is educated about the fear, it won't be fear anymore. It'll just be pain. And then you're back to the dog on the nail. So why am I saying all this? Because it goes back to this whole idea, if you build it, they will come. Yes, for a hobby, absolutely. For something that has time to slowly build an audience, I agree. That will eventually work. Like, given enough time, if you are doing something that you enjoy, eventually enough people will become aware of it over time where they will also say, I enjoy that, or I also have that pain, that solves my pain. And they'll get there, and they'll tell a friend, and it'll all snowball. But that takes a really, really long time to get started. And in order for that to even get started, what you're initially doing has to be both good enough and solve enough of a pain point where the ball even gets rolling. And I think in a lot of cases, especially with vendors, we underestimate how sexy and appealing the pain we're solving for really is. I would compare this a lot to all the failed YouTube channels you see, where there's lots of YouTube channels that eventually become successful, and we've all watched our favorite creators slowly build a following. But for all the people we've watched, if you build it, they will come, be successful. We've also seen, 10x more where they never get more than 3 subscribers because it doesn't really matter if they like the content they're making. The content is quite literally unconsumable. And the same can be true if we make an analogy with your product. There are some products and there are some vendors that just have kind of positioned themselves in an unconsumable way, either because what they're doing isn't particularly interesting or nuanced or different, or simply because the way they're presenting it just is so unappealing and bland that even if you do build it, probably no one's gonna come. And that's just a thing that happens. That's not malice. That's not incompetence. It's just you're excited about your own thing. You're jazzed up about your own thing, and you lose some perspective. And that's okay. It can happen. And some vendors will pivot and they'll, kind of redo their brand, figure things out. Other vendors go away and they come back later. And we see this a lot. We see people, they will start a product to create a solution. It just doesn't land. And then they go try again and the second one lands. And that's the joy of entrepreneurship. And God bless all of you entrepreneurs. You're amazing people. I don't have that kind of fortitude. But the point does still stand that just because you identified what you think is a problem and created a solution to it doesn't mean we're just automatically going to buy from you. And I think that it's good for all of my vendor friends, and then the MSPs who are sort of snarkily listening to this being like, yeah, vendors suck. MSPs, you're vendors too. You have all the same pain points as the vendors. It's just you don't have one coalesced, verticalized client base that can get together and express their disdain for how terrible your selling is. So you're not off the hook either. So if you're watching this and you're a vendor or you're an MSP, I think my biggest takeaway is just don't assume that the people that you're intending will consume your product understand the pain you're solving for. And even if they do, even if they acknowledge that that is a nail and that nail is sharp, you need to understand that just because they're sitting on a nail doesn't mean that whatever you're doing is worth moving off the nail. We're fundamentally lazy and comfort based as humans, and you do need to overcome that. And there's a variety of ways to do that. Some of them can be quite obtuse and dramatic, and others can be very subtle and soft, but doing nothing won't. If the dog is comfortable sitting on the nail, the dog's going to be comfortable sitting on the nail a month from now and a year from now. And if the nail or the dog or the conditions around them don't change, well, the dog's not going to move. And in some cases, yes, you can run a campaign of explaining why nails are evil and scary, and some dogs will move based on the fear. But once they realize that that was fear, it just goes back to pain. So your strategy needs to be more than simply scaring them about the fact that they're sitting on a nail. You need to explain specifically what the pain is, drive it home, make them feel the pain, communicate the value, and make very clear how your product explicitly and succinctly solves for that pain and what the ROI is. A lot of times we assume that we're pitching to other small business owners and they're going to connect those dots because of course they would. And let me just tell you, as a former MSP, and I know a lot of MSPs, they're not. They're just people. They're not business geniuses. They're not all going to get it on their own. You need to tell them. So vendors, just make it clear what pain you're solving for. Really drive it home. Explain why it matters. What the ROI is going to be. Don't assume the MSP is going to connect those thoughts. And MSPs, as you're listening, all this advice applies to you with your clients as well. But I know you already know that. Have a great Tuesday. And you know what? I think you should still build it. Even if nobody shows up, you build a baseball field on your own. That's pretty cool, even if no one looks at it. And to all the people out there who are running MSPs or vendors that have built something and no one's buying it, it's not successful, and you're going to have to, retire it, close it, shutter it, whatever. That sucks, and I'm sorry, but it's still cool that you did a thing. Because you did do a thing. You took nothing and you created something. And that's not a trivial or a token effort. And even if it didn't land, I still think that, the universe appreciates the fact that you tried. Try again. Your second time might work a lot better.